the 2026 World Cup might not happen, at least not the way FIFA planned. Right now, some of the world's biggest football nations are openly questioning whether they'll even send their teams to North America. Not because of stadiums, not because of logistics, because of one of the countries hosting it. And I know what you're thinking. We've been here before, right? Russia 2018. Boycott threats over Crimea. Everyone showed up anyway. Qatar 2022. Human rights outcry, labour scandals. And the tournament still happened. So what's different this time? Here's the thing. Both of those controversies were about the host nation's policies. This one, countries might not be allowed to enter the host nation's borders. Visa bans. Diplomatic freezes. The very real possibility that some of the best players in the world, Haaland, Vinicius, Bellingham, could be watching from home. This isn't a boycott. It's a lockout. And it started with one decision that blindsided FIFA completely. Let's get into it. First, we need to talk about what's actually happening. Donald Trump is back in the White House, and his administration's foreign policy has created a genuine crisis for this tournament. The constant talk about annexing Greenland, which is part of Denmark, a NATO ally, has created real tension with European nations. And these aren't just random countries we're talking about. These are major footballing powers. Trump's approach to the Greenland situation has been concerning for European leaders. At one point, he stated the US would be, frankly, unstoppable if they used excessive strength and force to acquire it. For a country about to host the world's biggest sporting event, threatening military action against allies sends a deeply problematic message. Then there were the tariff threats. Trump threatened to impose a 10% tariff on 8 European countries: Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, Netherlands and Finland, around the same time as the Greenland dust-up. Coincidence or part of the pressure play? He later walked these back, but the damage to diplomatic relations was already done. And critically for football, these countries represent some of the biggest federations in the sport. Germany, France, England, the Netherlands. These are the teams that drive global viewership and make the World Cup financially viable. But beyond diplomatic tensions, there are concrete, practical issues that are affecting the tournament directly. 4 countries competing in this World Cup, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Iran and Haiti, are subject to travel bans that effectively prevent their citizens from entering the United States. So you have national teams whose own fans cannot come to support them. Imagine qualifying for the World Cup and then having to tell your supporters they're not allowed to attend. And it's not just about official bans. The broader climate around immigration enforcement in the United States has made many international visitors genuinely concerned about travelling there. ICE operations have been extensive, and there have been incidents involving both American citizens and legal visitors that have raised serious questions about due process and safety. A Swiss criminal lawyer, Mark Peath, publicly advised fans to stay home and watch on television instead, citing concerns about unpredictable enforcement and the risk of detention or deportation. And remarkably, Sepp Blatter, yes, the former FIFA president who resigned amid corruption scandals, endorsed these concerns. When someone with Blatter's history is sounding more cautious than current officials, that should tell you something about how the situation is being perceived internationally. 1 second. Before we get into which major footballing nations are seriously discussing boycotts, make sure you're subscribed. This is the most politically complicated World Cup in modern history, and we're covering every angle from now until kickoff. Now, let's talk about what's really making FIFA nervous. The boycott discussions. Okay, Göttlich, vice president of the German Football Association and president of St. Pauli, made waves when he publicly stated that the time had come to seriously consider boycotting the 2026 World Cup. He referenced the Olympic boycotts of the 1980s and asked a legitimate question. If those were justified based on the threats at the time, why wouldn't a boycott be justified now? This matters because Germany isn't some minor federation trying to make headlines. Germany is one of the pillars of world football. They bring millions of viewers globally. They fill stadiums. Their presence makes sponsors happy and justifies the massive broadcasting deals that fund the tournament. Even a whisper of a boycott from a powerhouse like Germany sends shivers through FIFA's boardroom. And Germany isn't alone in expressing concerns. In the Netherlands, over 155,000 people signed a petition calling for the Dutch national team to boycott the tournament. British MPs suggested England and Scotland should consider withdrawal following Trump's threats regarding Greenland. In South Africa, opposition leaders called for their national team to withdraw, drawing parallels between current US policies and the international pressure that helped end apartheid. What's significant about these voices is that they're not coming from fringe groups or online activists. These are discussions happening within football federations, amongst politicians, and in mainstream media. The conversation has moved from should we protest to should we actually not go. But here's where we need to be realistic. Despite all of this, a full boycott remains highly unlikely. The reasons are straightforward. World Cups happen every 4 years. For many players, this represents their only chance to compete on the biggest stage in football. For others in their early 30s, this is their last opportunity. Asking these athletes to sacrifice that for a political statement is an enormous ask. And that's not a criticism of the players. It's simply acknowledging the human reality of the situation. Beyond the players, there are the federations themselves. They have sponsorship agreements worth millions. They have broadcasting contracts. They have financial commitments that would be catastrophic to break without an extraordinary reason. Qatar happened despite significant controversy. Russia happened despite the Crimea invasion. The economic machinery of the World Cup is incredibly difficult to stop once it's in motion. However, and this is crucial, there's something fundamentally different about this situation compared to previous controversies. Russia and Qatar faced criticism for their internal policies and past actions. But this is about the host nation actively threatening and alienating the very countries whose teams it's supposed to be hosting. That's genuinely new territory. Think about it from a federation's perspective. It's one thing to participate in a tournament despite disagreeing with the host's domestic policies. It's another thing entirely to participate when your own government is being threatened by that host. When your fans are being told they're not welcome. When your country's sovereignty is being casually discussed as negotiable. And this is where Canada and Mexico quietly emerge as the winners in this situation. While the United States has been creating diplomatic incidents, Canada and Mexico have simply been ready. They're not making threats. They're not causing problems. They're stable, prepared, and increasingly attractive to federations who might want matches moved if the situation deteriorates further. FIFA has built its brand on the idea that football transcends politics, that the World Cup is neutral ground where nations can compete regardless of their differences. It's a compelling narrative, and there's some truth to it. But it's also always been somewhat of a convenient fiction. Football has never truly existed outside of politics. Hosting decisions are political. Broadcasting rights are political. The very act of bringing nations together to compete is inherently political. FIFA has just preferred to pretend otherwise when it's convenient. But in 2026, that pretense is becoming impossible to maintain. When your host nation's president is threatening allied countries and implementing policies that directly affect participating nations, you can't credibly claim the tournament exists in some apolitical bubble. So what's the shocking truth behind the 2026 World Cup? The tournament will almost certainly happen. Most teams will show up, matches will be played, goals will be scored, and eventually someone will lift the trophy in New Jersey or Los Angeles or wherever the final ends up. But this World Cup has already fundamentally changed the conversation around hosting future tournaments. Because everyone involved, FIFA, sponsors, federations, broadcasters, is learning the same lesson. Infrastructure and financial guarantees aren't enough anymore. You need political stability. You need predictability. You need a host that won't spend the lead up to the tournament creating diplomatic crises or implementing policies that make participants question whether they should attend. The 2026 World Cup was designed to showcase American organizational capability and soft power. Instead, it's become a case study in how quickly things can unravel when the host nation's politics become the story rather than the football itself. Will there be an actual boycott? Almost certainly not. Will there be reduced attendance from certain nations? Very possibly. Will some matches get quietly moved to Canada or Mexico to avoid complications? We might see that happen. Will this change how FIFA evaluates future hosts? Absolutely. The real surprise isn't that controversy has found this World Cup. Controversy finds every World Cup. The surprise is that the controversy is being generated by the host itself. Usually, FIFA has to defend its tournaments from outside criticism. This time, they're having to manage the fallout from the country that's supposed to be rolling out the welcome mat. It's an unprecedented situation, and honestly, we don't know exactly how it's going to play out. But one thing is certain. The 2026 World Cup has already changed the game, whether FIFA wants to admit it or not. Let me know what you think in the comments. Would you travel to the US for this tournament, given everything happening? Do you think any teams will actually pull out? And how do you think this affects future World Cup hosting decisions? I'll see you in the next one.